Often the most profound metamorphosis occurs in complete silence, witnessed only by celestial beings. There exists a particular type of woman who refuses to bulldoze her path through existence. She neither controls circumstances nor pleads for recognition. Nevertheless, doors swing open before her. Souls gravitate toward her aura not due to her theatrics, but because of her harmony. She rarely dominates conversations. Yet she possesses the deepest roots, and what encircles her transcends mere admiration. It encompasses shelter. It encompasses essence. It represents what countless individuals overlook in our hurried existence. Sacred assistance emerging from profound tranquility. Within Eastern wisdom teachings, it is understood that the peaceful spirit becomes the sanctuary for divine energies. Contemporary brain science validates this when the nervous system achieves balance. When the mind attains synchronization, we access a realm where wisdom, instinct, and mental clarity emerge. This isn't illusion. This is biology. This isn't sorcery. This is evolution. That woman you observe navigating gracefully through hardship, maintaining honor in her quietude, walks not in isolation. She is embraced not by multitudes, but by serenity. Not by cheers, but by celestial guardians. A woman who discovers alignment with quietude becomes an unstoppable force. In a society that celebrates perpetual motion, obvious achievement, and vocal validation, the woman who selects silent power appears nearly transparent initially. Yet those who watch attentively begin detecting something unique about her. Not because she accomplishes more, rather because she undertakes less while doing so with mindfulness, with purpose, with internal harmony. Quietude is frequently misinterpreted. Individuals assume it represents sound's absence, expression's void, or frailty's indicator. However, quietude, when embraced with consciousness, transforms into power that surpasses vocabulary. It evolves into breathing energy, a harmonious condition, an invisible field that remains untouchable yet profoundly experienced. For the woman enveloped by this tranquility, the silence holds no emptiness. It overflows with direction. It brims with authenticity. Within that authenticity, she begins understanding she never walks alone. Picture a woman seated solitary in a bustling environment, a transit hub, a coffee house, or a space filled with chattering people. She remains wordless, yet her bearing stays composed, her expression peaceful, her breathing steady. You sense she seeks no attention, yet somehow she captures yours, not through her attire or speech, but through the calm that seems to emanate outward from her being. This calm isn't coincidental. It has been earned. It has been nurtured. It results from decisions she has chosen, silent inner resolutions to cease battling herself. From neuroscience's viewpoint, the human mind continuously monitors surroundings for security or danger. This mechanism, called neuroception, clarifies why certain individuals create anxiety while others generate calm without exchanging words. The woman aligned in silence has stabilized her nervous system. Her breathing no longer quickens. Her thoughts no longer whirl. She has constructed an inner refuge, and every surrounding mind can detect it. This explains why silence draws angels, because it represents structure, lucidity, and truth. This truth isn't rigid, it lives. It moves like liquid around obstacles. It doesn't battle existence, it comprehends existence. More crucially, it comprehends itself. In connections, particularly intimate ones, this silent alignment becomes among the most potent instruments a woman can possess. Because relationships aren't constructed solely through language. They're built through energy, through cadence, through emotional communications often unvoiced. When a woman maintains silence, not from suppression but from intention, she begins hearing subtle movements within her relationship. She hears the unspoken. She notices the configurations. She distinguishes between love and dependency, between connection and dominance. Consider the story of a woman named Lena. She had maintained a relationship spanning several years with a man who cared for her yet whose affection often brought chaos. He would express passion one instant and retreat the next. Lena, like many, believed her role involved keeping the bond alive, mending things, defending herself, fighting for the partnership. Yet the more she attempted, the more drained she became, until one day she ceased speaking. Not in resentment, not wielding silence as weaponry, but in silence as acceptance. She stopped attempting to control the relationship's rhythm and began listening to her own rhythm instead. She began rising earlier, sitting with her tea without phone, checking. She began journaling before responding to emotional texts. She began observing rather than reacting. Gradually, something transformed. The man she was with began feeling her presence more profoundly than before because she no longer struggled to be heard. She simply existed. The relationship either had to meet her in that space of quiet truth or dissolve. Eventually, it did dissolve, not because she stopped loving him, but because she stopped abandoning herself. In that silence, Lena lost nothing. She gained everything: clarity, liberation, a sense of self no longer dependent on another's opinion or attention. As she rebuilt her existence with this centered energy, she noticed something else. New connections entered her world, individuals aligned with her principles, friends who didn't drain her, opportunities matching her quiet discipline, and yes, love. But this time it felt peaceful. Not because it was flawless, but because she no longer needed to force it. This type of silence, the silence of inner alignment, becomes magnetic. It becomes protection. It becomes clarity. In the language of the unseen, this clarity attracts invisible support. Whether you term it divine guidance, intuition, angels, or simply grace, something begins moving around you when you begin moving inward. Eastern traditions often discuss the concept of Wu Wei, the art of non-forcing. It isn't passivity, but effortless action. It's understanding that proper timing, proper presence, and proper energy often accomplish more than aggressive effort ever could. The woman who grasps this principle lives in harmony with life's flow. She doesn't plead. She doesn't pursue. She aligns. And what aligns with her will come. Western psychology reflects this wisdom. Self-determination theory, for instance, explains that people flourish when they live from intrinsic motivation, when their actions stem from internal values rather than external approval. The woman who practices silent alignment lives from her essence, not her ego. In doing so, she becomes trustworthy. Others may not always agree with her, but they sense her clarity. They perceive that she isn't pretending, and this authenticity becomes her greatest form of influence. There is another woman, an elderly woman named Farida, who lived alone for many years after raising her children and losing her husband. To the external world, her life seemed quiet, unremarkable. But those who encountered her often departed with a strange sense of calm. She spoke softly, but when she did speak, her words were intentional. She had no time for rumors, for complaints, or for superficial drama. Instead, she moved slowly through life, watering her plants with reverence, making tea with patience, praying without performance. She laughed often, but never too loud. Her presence was her power. Young women in the community often visited her, not because she offered solutions, but because being near her reminded them of something they had forgotten: the power of being centered. They would ask her for advice, and she would often respond with a question. What does your breath tell you? She would ask, or what are you carrying that isn't yours? She lived by one principle: what is in harmony will remain. What is not will dissolve. And so she never forced anyone to stay in her life. She didn't argue to prove her point. She listened more than she spoke. And yet those who met her never forgot her, because the peace she carried was not from the world. It was from within. This is what it means to be surrounded by angels. It isn't necessarily a mystical experience. It's the result of living in such a way that you invite clarity, purity, and stillness into your daily life. The angels are metaphors for forces that protect you. Your wisdom, your intuition, your alignment with truth. And yes, perhaps even something more. But they don't come to the loud and scattered. They come to the woman who has emptied herself of noise. That woman may still feel pain. She may still feel loss. She may still cry at night. But she no longer feels lost because she has found a deeper home, a home that cannot be taken by disappointment, betrayal, or confusion. Her silence is no longer a prison. It is a sanctuary. People often misunderstand her. Some may think she is too serious. Others may say she is too distant. But what they cannot deny is the presence she brings, a grounded, serene, unwavering energy that offers stability in a world that spins too fast. And in time, they begin to respect her. Not because she demands it, but because she embodies it. And that respect doesn't just come from others. It comes from life itself. Life begins to open where she once struggled. The right people arrive. The wrong ones leave without conflict. Doors open, not all at once, but quietly, like the morning sun touching the earth after a long night. She has become a magnet for alignment, not because she chased it, but because she became it. In practical terms, cultivating this kind of silent alignment means making small, daily choices that anchor you in your own truth. It means waking up and choosing mindfulness over distraction. It means learning to respond rather than react. It means observing your thoughts before they become your words. It means protecting your peace as if it were sacred. Because it is. You don't need everyone to understand you. You don't need everyone to agree with you. What you need is to be congruent with yourself. And when you are, you will begin to feel the presence of something greater moving with you. It might not make sense to others. It might not even make sense to you at times, but you will feel the protection, the clarity, and the strength that come when your soul stops chasing and starts aligning. You will walk differently, speak differently, love differently. Not because you're trying to impress, but because you're no longer trying to survive. You are living fully, quietly, powerfully. And in that quiet power, you will find yourself surrounded, not by crowds, not by noise, but by a stillness so complete, it begins to echo in everything you touch. And in that echo, there is guidance. In that silence, there is love, not always loud, but always true. There is a silent language spoken long before words are ever formed. It is felt in glances, in gestures, in the pauses between sentences. It is the language of energy. And a woman who begins to understand this language realizes something profound. Her emotional field speaks louder than her voice ever could. Her energy precedes her presence. It walks into rooms before she does. It lingers long after she has gone. This understanding is not just spiritual, it is biological. The human brain is wired to detect emotion through micro signals, tone of voice, facial tension, and posture. Even a newborn baby without a single word can feel the emotional tone of its caregiver. It's why we instinctively step back from someone whose energy feels hostile, even if their words are polite. It's why we lean toward those who feel open, calm, and genuine, even if they speak very little. Energy does not lie. And the woman who begins to take responsibility for her emotional energy stops trying to control the external. She knows that how she feels, her inner landscape, will eventually shape the landscape around her. When she walks into a space carrying anxiety, unresolved pain, or emotional chaos, it will ripple outward. And when she walks into that same space carrying clarity, forgiveness, and stillness, something shifts. People soften, tensions drop, and hearts open without knowing why. One of the most powerful things a woman can do is become aware of what she is radiating, not just what she is saying. Emotional energy is a signal. And like any signal, it either attracts or repels. If a woman is constantly carrying fear of abandonment, it won't matter how many affirmations she repeats or how much she wants love. That fear will color every interaction. Subtly at first, then more obviously. She might cling, over-explain, or read too deeply into silence. She might expect rejection and unconsciously create situations that confirm it. It's not because she is broken. It's because her emotional frequency is tuned to fear. But when a woman starts doing the inner work to clear that frequency, to release what is not hers, to stop carrying guilt that doesn't belong to her, to stop defining herself through wounds that haven't been healed, her energy changes. She no longer enters relationships needing proof that she is lovable. She already knows she is. And that knowing becomes magnetic. There was once a woman named Clara who had spent most of her life in relationships that were imbalanced. She was always giving, always available, always pouring herself into others. And yet she kept ending up with partners who withdrew emotionally, who didn't reciprocate her efforts, or who took her for granted. She began to believe that maybe she wasn't enough, that maybe love just wasn't meant for her. Until one day, after a particularly painful breakup, she stopped asking why others couldn't love her and began asking a different question. What is it in me that keeps choosing this pattern? Clara didn't run to fix it. She didn't jump into the next relationship. She sat in her discomfort. She started meditating not to escape, but to observe. She began to notice that she often felt anxious when someone didn't reply immediately, that her body would tense when she sensed emotional distance, that she would overcompensate by being extra nice just to avoid being rejected. She realized that she wasn't showing up in relationships as her full self. She was showing up as someone hoping to be accepted. So Clara changed her focus. Instead of trying to be chosen, she chose herself. She stopped responding immediately to emotional triggers and started breathing through them. She started asking herself, is this anxiety mine or is it an old wound speaking? And with time, her energy began to shift. She stopped needing people to prove their love because she had already validated her own worth. When she eventually entered a new relationship, it was not with desperation. It was with presence. And her partner, unlike the ones before, responded differently. He felt her groundedness. He felt that she didn't need him to fix anything in her. And because she wasn't seeking to be saved, she attracted someone who came to build, not rescue. That's what happens when a woman's emotional field becomes clear. She no longer attracts through pain. She attracts through peace. Energy is subtle, but it's not mysterious. It's built from habit, from daily practices, from moment by moment decisions. When you hold resentment, it settles into your posture. When you live in fear, it shows up in your tone. When you doubt yourself, it echoes in your words. But the reverse is also true. When you choose integrity, your presence becomes trustworthy. When you cultivate self-respect, your energy commands healthy boundaries. When you align with honesty, even your silence becomes powerful. In relationships, especially romantic ones, this emotional field becomes the foundation. Words may start the connection, but energy maintains it. People can only connect with what you reveal emotionally. And if your emotional field is guarded, anxious, or reactive, even if you are physically present, you will feel emotionally distant. There's a quote that says, "You attract what you are, not what you want." This doesn't mean you must be perfect to receive love. It means that your emotional reality shapes what feels familiar to you. If chaos feels normal, you may unconsciously feel bored in peace. If validation feels like survival, you may confuse attention with intimacy. But when you begin to elevate your emotional energy, you begin to normalize peace. You begin to feel safe in slowness, in presence, in honesty. This emotional maturity requires discipline. Not the discipline of suppression, but the discipline of awareness. It means catching yourself before projecting your pain. It means recognizing that not every emotion is an instruction. Sometimes you feel abandoned, not because the other person left, but because you are touching an old scar. Sometimes you feel disrespected, not because someone insulted you, but because you haven't fully honored yourself. There's a woman named Mel who once said, "I used to think healing meant becoming softer, but it made me fierce. Not because I became louder, but because I became clearer." Clarity is not about certainty. It's about alignment, and emotional energy becomes clear when it is aligned with truth. That truth may be painful, but it frees you. It may be uncomfortable, but it protects you. And from that space, your presence becomes different. People often sense your energy before they understand your words. They feel your self-trust in the way you hold eye contact. They feel your peace in the way you speak without rushing. They feel your groundedness when you say no without guilt. And those who are not ready for that kind of presence may pull away. But those who are aligned will feel drawn, not to your beauty, not to your charm, but to your essence. This is why cultivating your emotional energy is one of the most powerful forms of relationship preparation, because it sets the tone. It creates safety not just for others, but for yourself. You no longer live in emotional reactivity. You begin to respond not from wounds, but from wisdom. And that wisdom changes everything. It changes how you speak, less impulsively, more intentionally. It changes how you listen, not to react, but to understand. It changes how you love, not to possess, but to witness. And slowly your emotional energy becomes a healing field, not just for yourself, but for others. You begin to notice that people open up around you, not because you ask the right questions, but because your presence feels safe. You begin to attract honesty, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. You begin to experience connection, not based on performance, but based on resonance. And resonance is key. Two instruments tuned to the same frequency will vibrate together even when only one is played. This is resonance. And the same is true in human relationships. When your emotional field is aligned, you begin to resonate with others who share that alignment. You no longer chase connection. You become connection. In ancient traditions, it was believed that certain people carried such purity of heart that the unseen would gather near them. Their energy was so clear, their intentions so aligned, that they became channels for divine presence. Whether or not you believe in the mystical, the metaphor remains powerful. The cleaner your emotional energy, the more deeply supported you feel, not just by people, but by life itself. Your life begins to mirror your frequency. Chaos will no longer feel like home. You will find peace not in retreating from the world, but in participating with intention. You will stop seeking to be seen and begin choosing to be felt. Because when your emotional energy speaks before you do, what it says determines everything that follows. A woman's life changes the moment she realizes that discipline is not punishment. It is permission. Permission to create space. Permission to invite clarity. Permission to summon what is sacred and remove what is not. And in this way, discipline is not a cold command. It becomes a divine invitation because the presence of order within her life sends a signal not only to the physical world, but to the unseen. Angels do not dwell in chaos. They gather where harmony is nurtured. They surround those who walk in quiet alignment with their inner and outer life matching. When a woman wakes each day without intention, her life is left vulnerable to the noise and demands of everything outside herself. But when she wakes with a centered heart, with habits rooted in purpose, her life begins to form a rhythm, a sacred architecture that protects her energy and invites wisdom. And in that structure, in that discipline, she begins to feel the unseen support that always existed but was previously hidden beneath distraction. Many people view discipline as something masculine, aggressive, or forceful. But true discipline is not harsh. It is compassionate. It is the loving structure you build to keep yourself aligned with what matters most. Think of a river. Without its banks, it becomes a flood. With boundaries, with shape, it becomes a force that gives life. In the same way, a woman's energy becomes powerful not when it flows freely in all directions, but when it is focused, directed, and held in integrity. In relationships, this kind of inner discipline becomes the silent force that shapes respect, desire, and connection. A woman who does not have order in her own life will depend on others to provide it. She may expect her partner to be the ground beneath her feet because she has not yet built it within herself. But a woman who lives in order, who has rituals that restore her, who honors her own time, body, and space, she does not lean to survive. She leans to share. She gives from fullness, not from lack. There's a woman named Lena who spent most of her 20s in a whirlwind of romance and emotional highs and lows. She was passionate, deeply loving, and intuitive, But her life was disorganized. She would sleep at odd hours, forget appointments, jump from one emotional state to another, and often let her partner's mood dictate her own. She mistook spontaneity for freedom and avoided structure because it felt like control. But over time, she began to feel a quiet exhaustion. Her relationships lacked stability. Her sense of self wavered, and though she gave love freely, it was rarely returned with the depth she desired. One morning, after yet another emotional night of confusion and unmet expectations, Lena sat in her room. Tired not just in her body, but in her soul, she looked around and noticed the clutter, not just physical but mental. Her phone was filled with unanswered messages. Her to-do list had turned into a source of anxiety. Her mind raced with thoughts that led nowhere. And for the first time, she admitted to herself the love she wanted to receive from others was the love she had not yet given to herself in structure and care. From that day, she didn't make grand declarations. She made small, disciplined choices. She began waking at the same time each day, not out of rigidity, but out of reverence for the morning silence. She started writing her thoughts each evening, not to analyze, but to listen to herself. She deleted the numbers of people who only reached out when it was convenient. She began to eat with intention, speak with more awareness, and protect her alone time like sacred ground. And what happened was not dramatic, but it was profound. Over time, Lena began to feel more rooted. She stopped seeking approval. She didn't need to be constantly reassured. When a man entered her life who lacked direction, she could feel it immediately. Not as judgment, but as clarity. She no longer tried to fix him or adapt to his inconsistencies. She simply continued her rhythm, and if he aligned, he stayed. If not, he left. Either way, she remained in peace. This is the quiet strength of discipline. It clears the space for truth to enter. It says to the world, I am not waiting for someone to save me. I have already begun building a life I respect. From the outside, such discipline may seem small. A woman folding her clothes carefully, lighting a candle before meditation, saying no to an invitation that would drain her. But these actions are declarations. Each one sends a signal to the unseen. I am ready to receive only what matches my inner harmony. In many ancient traditions, the home was considered a sacred temple, and the care with which it was maintained reflected the care within the soul. The woman who maintains her inner and outer space with respect is creating a vibration that does not need to be announced. It is felt. The way she prepares her meals, the way she walks into a room, the way she guards her attention. These are not chores. They are rituals of power. Modern psychology has long recognized the impact of habits on emotional well-being. Small daily rituals help regulate the nervous system, reduce anxiety, and increase a sense of control. A woman who implements consistent structure, waking rituals, reflective practices, nourishing routines, builds not only discipline, but emotional resilience. She is less likely to react impulsively. She is more grounded in her choices and in relationships. This makes her magnetic, not because she plays games, but because her self-respect is evident. Men too sense this difference. A woman who disciplines herself emotionally does not chase, does not cling, does not collapse when ignored. She feels the loss, but she does not lose herself. She grieves with dignity. She walks away with clarity. She communicates with intention, not desperation. And this level of inner stability challenges others to rise or to fall away. There was a story once told of a woman who lived in a small village. No, not for her beauty, wealth, or status, but for the peace that surrounded her. Every day at dawn, she would walk to the river with a small clay pot and fill it with water for her family. She took her time. She walked slowly, greeting the morning sun. Barefoot on the grass, the children in the village watched her in awe, not because she was doing anything spectacular, but because everything she did had rhythm, grace, and care. One day, a visitor to the village asked, "Why do people speak of her as if she were surrounded by angels?" An elder replied, "Because she lives in such a way that even the invisible wishes to dwell near her." This is what discipline creates. A field so ordered, so intentional that the chaos of the world cannot find a place to live there. It creates a kind of spiritual hygiene. Just as we bathe the body to remove dirt, we discipline the mind to remove confusion. We discipline the heart to remove bitterness. We discipline our time to remove distractions. And in that cleansing, in that quiet structure, we make space not just for peace, but for presence. When a woman builds this kind of life, she no longer fears solitude. She embraces it. She no longer fears rejection. She respects it because her validation is not built on others staying. It is built on her own staying power, her ability to remain true to herself even when others misunderstand her. This kind of woman does not need to argue her worth. She does not convince. She does not compete. She aligns. And alignment is not loud. It is consistent. She continues her rituals even when no one is watching. She honors her time even when it's inconvenient. She chooses quality over quantity in every area. Her food, her friendships, and in relationships. She becomes the kind of partner that doesn't just love deeply. She loves wisely. She doesn't wait to be chosen. She chooses. And not based on appearance or charm, but based on character, consistency, and shared values. Her heart is open, but her standards are clear. This is the woman who is no longer at war with herself. Her past may not be perfect. Her journey may be filled with detours, but she has arrived at a place where her inner world and outer life no longer contradict each other. She is not pretending. She is not performing. She is living. And in that living, something extraordinary happens. Life begins to mirror her discipline. Opportunities align. Connections deepen. Confusion fades. And while others may chase miracles, she becomes one simply by the way she moves through the world with grounded grace. It is not the size of her actions, but the sincerity of them. It is not the speed of her journey, but the stillness with which she takes each step. And the world notices. The right people notice. Life itself notices. Because the universe does not respond to chaos. It responds to clarity. And clarity is born through discipline, not rigid, not harsh, but sacred loving. A devotion to order that opens a path not just for personal success, but for spiritual alignment, emotional peace, and relational truth. There is a quiet form of strength in a woman who no longer needs to explain herself. A woman who has realized that her love is not a currency to be bartered for bare minimum attention. She no longer performs emotional acrobatics just to be seen, to be heard, or to be held. This woman has understood one of the most liberating truths in relationships. When love must constantly be proven to someone who keeps shifting the goalpost, it's not love. It's negotiation. And love in its truest form doesn't require proof. It recognizes presence. It's one thing to desire intimacy and companionship, but it's another to lose your voice trying to earn a seat at a table that demands silence as the price of admission. Women are not born to shrink themselves into roles that were never written for them. And yet many do. For years, for decades, they twist and fold their personalities into boxes, hoping that by becoming what he wants, they will be loved. But in doing so, they slowly vanish from the relationship and often from themselves. A woman in love can be patient, remarkably so. She can wait while he finds himself. She can wait while he figures it out. And she can even wait while he breaks her heart piece by piece in the name of confusion or trauma. But there comes a moment when the soul tires, not dramatically, not angrily, but silently. A quiet breaking that doesn't announce its arrival. A shift in her spirit when she realizes she deserves more than half-hearted promises and emotionally stingy gestures. This kind of realization is often born not from confrontation, but from observation. She watches. She listens. She pays attention to the words he says and how rarely they align with his actions. She notices the gap between how he shows up when he wants something and how absent he becomes when she needs something. And in that gap, a new awareness is born, not of who he is, but of who she has become in trying to keep him. Imagine a woman who has always been the nurturer, The fixer, the forgiver, the one who sends the good morning texts, who checks if he's eaten, who keeps the connection alive even when it's draining her. She does it because she believes in love, in commitment, in the potential she sees in him. But one morning she looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize the reflection. Her eyes are tired. Her smile is polite but hollow. Her joy, once abundant, now flickers like a dying candle. And in that moment she asks herself, when did I stop living for myself? That question is the beginning of her return. It's not a rebellion. It's not a threat. It's a reawakening. The journey from self-abandonment to self-recognition is not loud. It's not a sudden declaration of independence. It's subtle. It's the pause before replying to his text. It's the decision to stop explaining why she's upset because she realizes he already knows. He just doesn't care enough to change. It's in choosing silence over begging and distance over desperation. You see, love cannot be begged for. Affection cannot be negotiated. Respect cannot be extracted from someone who sees your value only when you walk away. A woman who keeps returning to emotional breadcrumbs eventually realizes she's starving in a relationship where she was meant to thrive. She starts to pull her energy back, not to manipulate, not to provoke, but to preserve. Because once a woman understands that she is not responsible for another adult's emotional maturity, something powerful shifts. She stops over-explaining. She stops accepting apologies that are followed by repeated patterns. She stops filling the silence with hope and starts filling her life with peace. This is not coldness. This is clarity. And clarity is what fuels her transformation. She no longer entertains potential. She aligns with presence. She no longer invests in fantasies. She builds with reality. Her boundaries stop being theoretical and become embodied. She no longer says, I deserve better. She becomes the kind of woman who attracts better by refusing anything less. Real love isn't about staying through torment to prove loyalty. It's not about enduring pain in the name of patience. It's about being seen, held, chosen consistently. Not perfectly, but honestly. Let's talk about consistency for a moment. Consistency is not about grand romantic gestures on anniversaries. It's not about sporadic moments of charm followed by weeks of emotional neglect. Consistency is in the daily effort. It's in checking in. It's in remembering small things that matter to her. It's in making her feel emotionally safe, not occasionally, but always. Many women fall in love with men who are intense, but inconsistent. These men know how to spark desire, but don't know how to sustain commitment. They say the right things, but they never do the hard things. They disappear when emotions get deep and return when they sense you're moving on. These men aren't offering love. They're offering confusion wrapped in charm. But a woman who has done the work on herself can see through that. She no longer confuses intensity with intimacy. She no longer finds chaos exciting. She no longer entertains people who are emotionally allergic to accountability. She understands now that the right person won't trigger her survival instincts. He will bring peace, not perform emotional gymnastics. One woman shared her story of how she gave everything to a man who only loved her when she was easy to love. The moment she had needs, emotions, or expectations, he labeled her too much. So she made herself smaller. She cried less, asked for less. She even convinced herself that being low maintenance made her more lovable, until one day she realized she had become invisible in a relationship that was supposed to be mutual. The day she stopped chasing him was not the day she stopped loving him. It was the day she started loving herself more. It wasn't anger that made her walk away. It was exhaustion. She was tired of explaining, tired of waiting, tired of proving. She realized she wasn't asking for too much. She was just asking the wrong person. This kind of woman isn't bitter. She's just better now. Better at recognizing her worth. Better at walking away when actions don't match words. Better at loving without losing herself in the process. And that's what shifts the dynamic entirely. When a woman no longer fears being alone, she becomes powerful beyond measure. She no longer tolerates loves, or emotional crumbs. She no longer gives access to her sacred space to people who don't bring reverence and consistency. Some men only love women who doubt themselves, because a woman unsure of her worth is easier to manipulate. But the moment she steps into her clarity, into her confidence, he becomes uncomfortable. Not because she changed, but because she remembered who she was before she made him her world. This remembering is sacred. It is not about arrogance. It is not about revenge. It is about reclamation, reclaiming her voice, her boundaries, her joy, her peace. There's a quote that says, "She remembered who she was and the game changed." And indeed, it does, because the woman who remembers her worth no longer begs for what she deserves. She embodies it. In one quiet story, a woman named Lena had been in a relationship for 7 years. She had sacrificed her career goals, her friendships, even parts of her identity to be who he needed. But when he left, she realized she had no idea who she was anymore. At first, she grieved deeply, but then slowly she started doing things she loved, painting, traveling, journaling, dancing in her kitchen. And with every step, she remembered parts of herself she had abandoned. Years later, she didn't look back at the breakup with anger. She looked back with gratitude, because it was the catalyst that forced her to return to herself. Not every relationship is meant to last forever, but every relationship teaches. The ones that break you open often rebuild you stronger, wiser, more whole. Women who rise after heartbreak don't just rise, they transform. They no longer let emotional neglect mask